"You are nothing but a trash delivery dog." He screamed those exact words. His face was red with absolute rage. He held a container of boiling hot soup in his hand, and without a single ounce of hesitation, he hurled it right at the young man's face. The scalding liquid splashed across the driver's cheek. You could hear the sharp gasp of pain. But the man in the $2,000 suit didn't care. He just laughed. He thought he was untouchable. He thought money gave him the right to treat another human being like garbage. But he was dead wrong. If you refuse to stand by while the elite crush the working class, drop a comment right now and say, "I stand with the underdog." This is your declaration. Let the algorithm know that we do not tolerate this kind of abuse. Hit that subscribe button to join our community of truth seekers. Now, let's freeze this frame right here. Look at the smug grin on his face. He has no idea that his entire empire is about to burn to the ground. To understand how a bowl of soup cost a man his freedom, we need to rewind the clock exactly 24 hours. The sky over the city was a bruised purple. A massive storm was brewing off the coast. Rain was already lashing against the pavement. Out there in the freezing wind was Marcus. He was 28 years old. He worked 3 different gig apps just to keep the lights on and feed his little girl. He didn't have the luxury of calling in sick. He didn't have stock options or a golden parachute. He only had his beat-up electric bike and a relentless drive to survive. Every single day was a battle against the clock. The delivery apps tracked his every move. A drop in his rating meant a drop in his income. It was a brutal, unforgiving system. And on the other side of this city lived Richard. Richard was the vice president of supply chain at a massive tech conglomerate. He lived in a glass penthouse overlooking the harbor. He drank espresso that cost more than what Marcus made in a week. Tomorrow was going to be the biggest day of Richard's life. The board of directors was officially promoting him to chief executive officer. He had clawed his way to the top by stepping on anyone who got in his way. Empathy was a word that didn't exist in his vocabulary. He viewed the world strictly in terms of winners and losers, and in his mind, gig workers were the ultimate losers. They were just invisible gears in the machine, designed to serve his needs. The storm intensified as the afternoon wore on. The streets flooded. Traffic ground to an absolute halt. Most sensible people were safely indoors, but Richard wanted his favorite clam chowder from a high-end restaurant across town. He tapped a few buttons on his phone. He placed a premium rush order. The app pinged. Marcus accepted the job. He zipped up his thin rain jacket and pedaled into the blinding downpour. He knew it was a dangerous route. The roads were slick with oil and freezing rain. Cars were hydroplaning all around him. But the payout for this delivery was high. It was enough to buy his daughter the new shoes she desperately needed for school. So he pushed harder. He navigated through the gridlock with practiced precision. His fingers were completely numb from the cold. Water soaked right through his worn-out boots. But he kept his eyes on the GPS. He arrived at the restaurant, grabbed the insulated bag, and secured it tightly. The soup was boiling hot, sealed in a premium container. He checked the time. He was actually 3 minutes ahead of schedule. He took a deep breath and started the treacherous journey to the financial district. But then, disaster struck. A major intersection was completely blocked by a collision. Sirens wailed in the distance. The police had cordoned off 3 blocks. Marcus was trapped. He immediately pulled out his phone. He sent a polite, professional message to the customer through the app. He explained the situation with the accident. He apologized and estimated a 5-minute delay. Most people would understand. Most people have a shred of common decency, but Richard was not most people. The phone buzzed aggressively in Marcus's frozen hand. He looked down at the screen. The message from Richard read, "I don't care if someone died, get here now." Marcus blinked, water dripping from his eyelashes. He typed back, "Sir, the police are blocking the road. I am detouring right now." 3 seconds later, another message popped up. "You have exactly 5 minutes before I 1-star you and get your account permanently suspended." A knot tightened in Marcus's stomach. A suspension meant no money for the week. It meant missing rent. It meant failing his child. He couldn't let that happen. He veered his bike off the road and onto a narrow, uneven pedestrian path. It was incredibly dangerous. The wheels slipped on the wet cobblestones. He almost crashed twice. His heart was pounding out of his chest. The app pinged again. This time, Richard was texting in all caps. "Run a red light if you have to, you incompetent fool. My time is worth thousands of dollars a minute. What is yours worth?" Nothing. The sheer cruelty of those words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Why do people with so much power feel the need to crush those with so little? If you have ever been disrespected at your job by someone who thought they were better than you, drop a comment right now and tell your story. Let's expose this toxic culture together. Make sure you subscribe, because the karma in this story is something you do not want to miss. Marcus pushed through the pain in his legs. He ignored the stinging rain whipping against his face. He finally reached the towering glass skyscraper where Richard worked. It was a monument to corporate greed. He parked his bike and rushed into the opulent marble lobby. He was shivering uncontrollably. He approached the front desk, holding the thermal bag as carefully as he could. He was exactly 2 minutes late. 2 minutes. He thought maybe, just maybe, the customer would understand once he saw the terrible weather outside. But as the elevator doors chimed and slid open, a tall man in a tailored suit stormed out. It was Richard, and he was looking for a fight. The lobby fell completely silent. The security guards stood by, watching nervously. They knew Richard's reputation. They knew he was a man who fired people just for looking at him the wrong way. Marcus wiped the rain from his eyes and pulled the food out of the bag. He forced a tired, polite smile. "Good afternoon, sir. I am so sorry for the delay. The roads are completely flooded." He held out the paper bag with the hot soup inside. Richard didn't take it. He just stood there, glaring at Marcus with eyes full of absolute disgust. He looked at the puddle of water forming beneath Marcus's worn-out boots. He looked at the cheap rain jacket, and then he looked at his own reflection in the polished marble wall. The contrast was sickening. One man was struggling to survive, while the other was drowning in his own arrogance. This was the moment that would define both of their lives forever. Richard didn't take the bag. He just stared at it like it was a pile of garbage. 2 minutes, Richard said, his voice dangerously low. "You are 2 minutes late." Marcus swallowed hard. "I know, sir. Like I said in the message, the police had the main road blocked off. I had to take a detour through the park." Richard stepped closer. He was a good 6 inches taller than Marcus, and he used every bit of that height to intimidate him. "Did I ask for an excuse?" His voice echoed off the high marble ceiling. People in the lobby started to stop and stare. A couple of executives in tailored suits paused by the elevator bank, watching the spectacle. But nobody intervened. "No, sir, I'm just explaining." "You don't explain anything to me," Richard suddenly snapped, his voice cracking like a whip. "You are a delivery boy. Your only job in this world, your only purpose, is to bring me what I want, exactly when I want it." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He thought about his daughter. He thought about the rent due on Friday. He forced himself to stay quiet. He just held out the bag a little further. "Please, sir. Your food is getting cold." Richard snatched the bag out of his hand so violently that the paper ripped. He pulled out the premium plastic container of clam chowder. It was still radiating intense heat. Richard looked at the container, and then he looked at his hand. A single drop of rainwater from Marcus's jacket had transferred onto Richard's expensive silk cuff. It was just water. But to Richard, it was the ultimate insult. It was the filth of the lower class touching his pristine world. "Look what you did," Richard whispered, his eyes widening with unhinged fury. "Look at my suit." "Sir, it's just a drop of water. This suit costs more than your miserable life." Richard's face turned a violent shade of red. He popped the lid off the soup container. A thick cloud of steam billowed out into the cold air of the lobby. What happened next took less than 3 seconds. But for Marcus, it felt like it happened in slow motion. Richard didn't just drop the soup. He didn't just throw it on the floor. He pulled his arm back, and with all the force he could muster, He hurled the boiling liquid directly into Marcus's face. The pain was instantaneous and blinding. Marcus screamed. It was a guttural, agonizing sound that tore through the quiet lobby. He collapsed to his knees, clutching his face. The scalding thick soup burned through his skin, melting into his pores. He couldn't see. He could only feel the searing, unbearable fire on his left cheek and neck. He was gasping for air, the heat suffocating him. And what did Richard do? Did he apologize? Did he realize he had just committed a violent crime? No. He stood over Marcus, looking down at him with absolute contempt. Maybe next time, you'll learn to be on time. Richard spat. He threw the empty plastic container onto the floor next to Marcus's shaking body. Security, get this trash out of my building. He's making a mess. The two security guards finally jolted into action. But they didn't go to help Marcus. They rushed over to escort Richard to his private elevator, making sure he wasn't bothered any further. They left Marcus writhing on the cold marble floor. If you are watching this and your blood is boiling, I need you to listen to me very carefully. What would you do in this exact situation? If you were standing in that lobby, would you step in to help Marcus, or would you freeze like the rest of those cowards? Leave a comment right now and tell me your honest answer. Because silence is what allows monsters like Richard to thrive. Do not be silent. Let your voice be heard in the comments. As Marcus lay there in agonizing pain, something incredible was happening. Something Richard was entirely too arrogant to notice. Let's zoom in on Marcus's cheap, worn-out rain jacket. Right there, near the collar. The second button from the top looked a little different from the others. It was slightly thicker. It had a tiny, almost invisible glass lens in the center. It was a high-definition micro bodycam. Marcus had bought it for $30 on Amazon a month ago after a customer lied about receiving their food. He wore it every single day to protect himself from scammers. He never expected it to capture a felony assault by a Fortune 500 executive. The tiny red light underneath the fabric was blinking steadily. It had recorded everything. It caught the crystal-clear audio of Richard's threats. It captured the exact moment the boiling soup hit Marcus's face. It recorded the security guards walking away, proving criminal negligence. Every single frame was safely uploaded to a secure cloud server in real time through Marcus's phone. Richard thought he had just taught a peasant a lesson. He had no idea he had just handed Marcus the key to his complete and utter destruction. Richard went up the elevator, feeling a rush of adrenaline. He wiped the single drop of water off his cuff with a silk handkerchief and threw the cloth in the trash. He walked into his corner office, completely unbothered by the fact that he had just scarred a man for life. His secretary handed him a fresh cup of coffee and his briefing notes for tomorrow's board meeting. "Everything perfect, Richard?" she asked, noticing his slightly elevated breathing. "Perfect," he smiled, a cold, shark-like grin. "Just had to take out the trash." He spent the rest of the evening celebrating his impending promotion with expensive scotch and yes men. He slept like a baby that night. The sleep of a man without a conscience. Marcus slowly got to his feet back in the lobby. His face was blistering, angry, and red. The pain was excruciating, but a strange sense of calm washed over him. He didn't yell back. He didn't try to attack Richard. He knew the rules of the game. If he laid one finger on that executive, he would be the one going to jail. The elite always win the physical fights because they own the system. But you can't fight video evidence. Marcus walked out of the building, the freezing rain mixing with the hot soup on his face. He didn't go to the hospital right away. He went straight to the local police precinct. He walked up to the front desk. The desk sergeant looked up, shocked at his burns. "Son, you need an ambulance," the officer said. "No," Marcus replied, his voice trembling but remarkably steady. "I need to report an assault with a deadly weapon. And I have it all in 4K resolution." The wheels of justice are usually slow, especially when they are rolling against a billionaire corporation, but when the police saw that footage, when they heard the sheer malice in Richard's voice, the case immediately escalated from a civil dispute to a priority criminal investigation. Misdemeanor battery at the very least. Aggravated assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm if the prosecutor wanted to push it. And the timing? The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Because while Marcus was giving his statement, Richard was preparing for his coronation. The next morning, the sun finally broke through the heavy storm clouds, casting a harsh golden light over the city's financial district. Inside the top-floor boardroom of Richard's conglomerate, the atmosphere was absolutely electric. The massive room smelled of expensive leather, fresh espresso, and unbridled corporate power. Dozens of shareholders, board members, and elite executives sat around a polished mahogany table that stretched 30 feet long. At the head of the table stood Richard. He was wearing a brand-new, custom-tailored Italian suit that cost more than a reliable used car. He looked out at the sea of faces, soaking in their admiration and applause. This was it. The exact moment he had worked his entire ruthless life to achieve. He cleared his throat, leaning into the silver microphone. He began his acceptance speech, talking about relentless efficiency, about cutting the dead weight, and about how only the strong deserve to survive in this modern economy. He spoke about how true leadership required making hard choices and demanding absolute perfection from every single person below you. He was practically glowing with toxic arrogance. But as he spoke, something strange began to happen. A quiet, nervous murmuring rippled through the back of the room. A senior board member looked down at her phone, her eyes widening in absolute horror. Then another executive pulled out his tablet. Then another, and another. Within 60 seconds, the entire room had completely stopped listening to Richard's speech. They were all staring down at their glowing screens, their faces pale, their expressions twisting from respect to profound disgust. Richard noticed the sudden shift in the room's energy. His confident, shark-like smile faltered for just a second. "Excuse me," Richard said loudly, trying to regain control of the room. "I believe the future of this massive company requires our full and undivided attention." The chairman of the board, an older billionaire with a stern, unforgiving face, slowly stood up. He didn't look at Richard with admiration anymore. He looked at him like he was a disease. "Richard," the chairman said, his voice cold and flat, "turn on the projector behind you, right now." Richard frowned, genuinely confused. He grabbed the silver remote from the table and clicked the button. The massive 80-inch screen behind him flickered to life. It wasn't a graph showing their quarterly profit margins. It wasn't a slide about corporate synergy. It was a video on a major social media platform, and it already had 5 million views. Richard's blood ran ice cold as he heard his own voice echoing through the state-of-the-art surround sound system. "You are a delivery boy. Your only job in this world is to bring me what I want." He spun around in sheer panic. There, on the giant screen, was the exact moment he threw the boiling hot soup directly into Marcus's face. The high-definition Bodycam had captured every single agonizing detail. The pure, unadulterated malice in Richard's eyes, the sheer, breathtaking cruelty of his actions, the heart-wrenching scream of a young father who is just trying to survive the storm. The video had been posted online just hours ago by a local investigative news outlet, and the internet had absolutely exploded. The public outrage was unlike anything the tech company had ever seen in its history. People were already gathering to protest outside the lobby doors downstairs. The company's stock was plummeting in pre-market trading, losing hundreds of millions of dollars in value by the minute as investors panicked. Richard's mouth opened, but no words came out. The arrogant, untouchable executive was suddenly struggling to draw breath. He looked at the silent board members, his hands shaking violently. "Listen, you have to understand, this is taken entirely out of context," he stammered, cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. "That man was trespassing. He was threatening me. He was." Before he could finish his pathetic lie, the heavy oak doors of the boardroom burst open. 4 uniformed police officers marched straight in. They didn't look impressed by the expensive suits, the luxury watches, or the mahogany table. They walked right past the billionaires and headed directly for Richard. "Richard Sterling?" the lead officer asked, his hand resting firmly on his utility belt. Richard took a panicked step back, his back hitting the screen that was still looping his monstrous behavior. "You can't do this," Richard gasped, his voice cracking. "Do you have any idea who I am?" I am the CEO of this company. I make this city run. The chairman of the board slammed his fist on the table, making everyone jump. No, Richard, you are not, the chairman barked. You are fired. Effective immediately. Security will clear out your desk. Richard's entire world shattered into a million pieces in that exact second. The lead officer grabbed Richard's arm, spinning him around roughly. Richard Sterling, you are under arrest for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. The sharp, metallic click of the steel handcuffs echoing in the silent boardroom was the sweetest sound of justice anyone had ever heard. Richard was paraded out of the building. He didn't get to take his private executive elevator. He was escorted through the main lobby, the exact same lobby where he had assaulted Marcus the day before. This time, there were dozens of news cameras flashing rapidly in his face. He tried to hide his face, crying like an absolute coward, his $2,000 suit wrinkled and ruined by the heavy rain as they shoved him into the back of a squad car. That night, instead of sleeping on Egyptian cotton sheets in his penthouse, Richard found himself sitting on a cold, concrete bench in a holding cell, completely stripped of his power. He lost his career, his reputation, and his freedom, all in a single morning. And what about Marcus? Marcus didn't just get justice, he got his entire future back. When the massive tech conglomerate realized the catastrophic legal and public relations nightmare they were facing, they immediately settled out of court to avoid a highly publicized trial. They paid Marcus a settlement so incredibly large, he would never have to work a grueling gig economy job for the rest of his life. He didn't just pay his rent, he bought a beautiful, spacious home in the quiet suburbs. It had a massive backyard where he could finally pursue his dream of growing his own organic vegetables and building a large pond to raise fish, creating a peaceful, healthy life for his daughter. He achieved the ultimate financial freedom he had always worked so hard for. Not by stepping on others, but by standing up for his own dignity. He proved that a positive, unyielding spirit, a man who is never afraid of failure, will always outlast the fragile egos of the elite. Now, let's take a hard look at the reality of this situation. The law is very clear on this matter. A boiling hot liquid is legally classified as a dangerous weapon when used intentionally to cause severe bodily harm. What Richard committed was not a simple lapse in judgment, it was a violent, premeditated felony. Gig workers, delivery drivers, service staff, these are human beings fighting everyday battles just to keep society functioning. They have the absolute legal right to bodily autonomy and safety in their workplace, which happens to be the busy streets we all share. But the system often relies on victims staying quiet and taking the abuse. If Marcus hadn't been smart enough to wear that hidden camera, it would have been the word of a powerful billionaire against a poor delivery driver. We all know who the corrupt system would have believed. So, I have to ask you, the person watching this video right now, if you saw a man like Richard berating and physically threatening a service worker in a public lobby, would you pull out your phone to record the truth and protect them? Or would you look away, keep walking, and pretend it wasn't your problem? Does our society secretly enable these elitist monsters by choosing the path of silent cowardice? Look deep into your conscience and leave your honest answer in the comments below. Don't forget to hit subscribe and join our family of truth tellers. You will not want to miss our next story. The karma is absolute poetry. See you in the next one.